Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Albert. In this show, I talk about technology, building a company as a CTO and co-founder, and have guests to discuss their roles in technology and entrepreneurship. Today, I'm joined by John Doran, Director of Engineering at Phorest Salon software, speaker, and one of the organizers of this year's ShipItCon here in Dublin, which is a community-driven, nonprofit conference about software delivery. Thanks so much for joining us, John.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great. Would you give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, I've been working here in Phorest for the last 3.5 years, and really enjoying it. We've got really high growth business, lots of great challenges technically around scaling the system, and lots of great people here. So really happy there. And then also this year I've been helping organize ShipItCon, which is an awesome conference which is really focused on the delivery of software. And
Yes. Let's start with ShipItCon because that's really interesting. What's the background of it?
Yeah, background there is a few guys in 2017 did the very first ShipItCon in Dublin. Tom and Ross McKinley and another person. And essentially it was a really great success. I went along myself, brought my team along. I thought it was a really great event just to gather Get yourself out of the office, gather some thoughts around software delivery, listen to some really great speakers with their kind of thought leadership around it. And it was a really good day. There was about 150 folks there. It was in the Mansion House, and it just felt like a really good formula for success. So last year it didn't happen. So essentially, I know Tom through the Docker meetups and many other things. So we just said, let's get going again this year and see what we can do. And we've made some serious progress in the last couple of months, to say the least. Really excited about it.
So how is it different? What does community driven mean?
Yeah, so there's a few things like, the first thing is like, we're not trying to make any money from it, and we're not trying to actually, push a brand or do loads of advertising. It's really about getting people together to really focus on software delivery, and bring really great speakers, and also encourage local people who maybe are talking around the meetup circuit and haven't really gone out there to do a talk, and really just trying to get everyone together to push that kind of agenda. So like, for example, we'll give any profits back to charities. We're going to try and get some charities there to actually do a stand. The main way we'll actually pay for it, because it's quite expensive, to fly some of those bigger speakers over, to actually feed 200 people in the Mansion House, lighting, all that good stuff. So the main thing really is, we've got some really great sponsors on board, to help us out. So that's been awesome. And ticket sales is going to be a very small amount of money, really enough to ensure people have skin in the game to attend.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Have you announced any speakers yet?
Yeah. So, our first big speaker was, actually Sam Newman. So he's the author of Building Microservices. He's really great speaker. He has a lot of great content on breaking apart monoliths, serverless. He's a really great speaker. He's worked in ThoughtWorks for 10 plus years, and now he's on the speaking stage. So, yep.
Great. And we'll be at the Mansion House.
Mansion House again. It's booked. Deposits paid. So hopefully I don't need to pay anything out of my own pocket, and we can get all the sponsors on board. So if anyone's listening and wants to help out, certainly feel free to reach out to me.
What's the date?
It's 6th of September. So we've got a good few months. So Sam is our first speaker announced. We've got a really great speaker, 95% along the way. So I was checking my email very early this morning to see if a confirmation. So and then there's also actually some really great talks submitted. We've got about 45 talks submitted, that we need to spend a lot of time going through, to make sure that we have a really good balance of speakers and the right topics. So for us, it's a lot about the future of shipping software. We want people to think about where they'll be in 10 years and where we will be as an industry. And So we're pushing that as some of the subjects, and there's some really great talks from people who are in Stripe, Intercom, the serverless framework, just to name a few. Like, just really excited about some of the talks that have been submitted.
Nice. Yeah. So is it going to be a single track or multi-track?
Single track, yeah. It's a big room. We're hoping for 150 to 200, but to be honest, with the speakers that we've got lined up, I think we could nearly do 300.
Oh, wow.
We're doing some other things as well. Like, we're going to try and get a quiet room, maybe for people who need that little bit of space to chill out. And we're going to try and make it as good as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. I look forward to hearing more about it and hopefully attending.
Cool, thanks.
So can you tell me a little bit about your role?
Yeah.
Like your actual function,
the day-to-day.
Yeah.
So this is just the ShipItCon is just the side piece. My day-to-day is really, I'm responsible for engineering in Phorest. So what that means is, essentially product delivery, uptime, and scaling the business. So we've got 30 people in product and engineering, and I'm responsible for 5 teams that are comprised of that delivery. Yeah.
How big was the company when you first arrived here?
So we've
or at least the IT department, or the development group, or whatever you call it yourself.
There was 5 people in the engineering group when we joined 3.5 years ago. Our CEO was the product owner. We had essentially a bare bones setup. We were just really trying to do our best to keep things going and make ends meet. And in terms of the company itself, there was roughly 75 people when I joined, and about 1,800 customers. So our customers are SMBs. Now we've got over 200 people, and over 5,500 customers, new regions, Australia, for example, and Germany. So yeah, it's been exciting to see the different stages of the company, because it's not the same company I was when I joined. We're in this lovely office today, and it's cool to see those different challenges and be part of actually solving them.
So what was the infrastructure like back in the beginning? In your beginning?
So to talk, like, the main infrastructure of the Phorest system was essentially one CloudFormation stack, which lived and comprised of everything that the system had that was deployed. So one of those for the US and one of them for Europe.
And what was the journey from where that was to where you've gotten to now?
Pretty big journey, I would say. It's essentially that big stack was growing and growing in size. So take, for example, the EC2 instances were huge. And there was lots of essentially throwing caches at it to cope with the load, because more customers coming on board. And those big servers that were stateful kind of struggled with that. So to break that down, there's so many different components to trying to solve that problem. But to take it away from infrastructure for a sec, it would kind of start at the workflow. So when you look at the workflow of a team, and they're delivering software maybe once a month or maybe once a quarter, and like, just like maybe not a code smell, but like a team smell would be that, like, our CTO at the time, he literally couldn't take a holiday without bringing his laptop with him, because something went wrong. He'd have to redeploy that stack. It would take a long time to deploy when it actually needed to. So like hours and hours of testing changes, making sure nothing broke, even configuration changes and stuff was really slow and tedious. So things like that. And then when you look at like something like I was actually only reading this the other day, like the Joel test for, like the acid test for, And one of them is the ability to ship changes, fast to production, and having automated testing and that kind of stuff. And it was missing. There's some really good foundations in Phorest when it was originally built, around the integration tests and stuff, but decayed over time, it would be safe to say, and ignored. So,
that's, as a founder and CTO myself, I totally understand that you're not always making the best possible decision. You're making the best decision at the time.
Yeah, with your resources that you have. Yeah.
So there's a lot of times that you're choosing not to do something in the best way for the need of speed and the needs of the business.
Yeah. And when it kind of catches you out is when you don't maybe look at or track some of those decisions you make and actually go back and fix them. Because if you keep going forward, then you might get into a state of decay.
Yeah, I'm constantly, that's what I found is that the team and the flow of work in the team are the hardest challenges.
Yeah, exactly.
And the tech itself is not simple, but it's a much simpler. It's a known problem to be solved.
It's a lot easier to tell a computer what to do than a human, unfortunately.
What have you learned through that process with helping manage the flow of work?
Essentially, you need to be so confident in your software that you can click a button and ship it to production. And you need to get to a stage where you have really good, essentially really good comfort zone and assurances that what you're building, what you're shipping is safe. So creating a safe environment and a safe automation around that, really important. And then what it does is it unlocks this great kind of Pandora's box of goodness, because you've got product owners are getting builds that aren't just running on a developer's machine, and they're getting, feedback from customers on, stuff that we've introduced over time, like feature flags and all that good stuff. Just unlocks so much for us.
So how do you actually implement your feature flags? Because that's a topic that's extremely compelling.
We could talk about that for a while. So on the front end, we, over the last couple of years, have moved a lot of our native point of sale app to web. And part of that for us is using Launch Darkly, which is a feature flagging product that we bought in. So rather than going to build our own, we leverage off them, and it's been a game changer, I would say, for us. We've been able to control our rollouts really tightly between our beta testers and even internal people. We can control who sees feature flags based on the type of user they are, their region, some other really cool kind of ways of targeting users. So that's been really powerful for us. And what it's actually allowed us to do is we even feature flag some of our refactorings or technical work. So we literally ship every PR to production. We test it by using like a revision key. So it's not active. So we would have like a version of every PR we ship is in production. We would get that SHA key and test it. And then once we've tested it, we'd activate it. So really, really powerful for us. And we've gone from shipping like once a quarter between the front end and back end 40 times a week to production. So I know like there's other companies that claim to have hundreds and hundreds and thousands per day, but we're small. Like we're still maybe only 15 engineers at the end of the day. So it's pretty impressive, I think.
That's when we set up our automation pipeline. So we check code in, PR gets merged, that then ships to test, automatically deploys, and then we just tell our bot to ship it to production.
Yeah.
We're not quite ready to ship straight to production. We don't have enough controls in between commit to.
Yeah, and that's fair to say. Like we put a lot of the ownership on the engineers to make that final step of activation. It's not like we have such good test coverage there that we know every last thing will be sorted out, but we try to evaluate the risk level when we do activate. So it's kind of continuous delivery with very low friction to get it to actually the deployment. Yeah.
I'd love to see a more detailed description of how that actually works with the activation.
Yeah, I can try talk to it, but
no, I understand that doesn't necessarily suit audio.
Yeah. So what one of our engineers who championed that, he calls it lightning deployments, and the idea is that your front end is served by essentially a URL that stores the HTML in a Redis cache, and the keys for that HTML are different versions of your application, and they get returned by the server. So it gives us a lot of flexibility and control there.
Yeah, I still can't. I mean, just audio can't do that justice. No. You'd have to see pictures. Yeah. But yeah, that's really neat. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Oh, just I was going to ask. You mentioned having your CEO as the PO there in the beginning, and we're in a very similar situation. Can you talk about the challenges that may have caused?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing is that when the CEO tells an engineer to do something, they do it without really questioning it. And that's great sometimes, but maybe sometimes it's in the interest of getting a sale across the line or fixing something for a very pissed off customer, and then maybe not taking the interests of many customers their priority versus one. So the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few sometimes. And actually Ronan built a lot of the foundations of Phorest with a few engineers, and it stood the test of time. There's lots of really great stuff in there. I think one thing would be that we didn't really appreciate the value of designers at the start, so we didn't really have that. So you would see a lot of in the older products that we have been rebuilding, a lot of very similar, just, database tables on the UI essentially, because engineers sometimes aren't very good at that side of things. So we just plop the data on the screen. So they're just a few things. But also it has an effect on the business as well, because when CEO is so involved in the product and we're trying to scale, focus gets, burnout essentially happens when you're trying to do too much. So
yeah. And that's one of the things you also see is that obviously the CEO has a load of responsibilities, keeping the business running, keeping the business in customers or money or whatever. So they're not always available
to make decisions,
the decisions at the time that would make it as convenient.
Yeah. So Paddy joined as a head of product at the same time I joined, taking a lot of that responsibility away from Ronan. And I think one of his first jobs was to tell some customers no to some things that was promised to them. Yeah.
So let's see. I guess we've already covered that. I saw in some of the slides you sent over to me, the PR to production, but we kind of talked through that with the lightning bits.
Maybe go into the Docker stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
So we mentioned at the start that Phorest was, when we joined, very much a single stack and a big server that was getting really expensive and had lots of caching and stuff. So the big thing for us here was that we needed to become able to scale better and decompose that big system. So for us, that meant removing the caches, and to break apart that bigger system. So, rather than 5 servers living in one CloudFormation stack and being deployed at the same time, to just break them into their own containers in our case. So we moved everything to being Docker based. And then as part of that, then we plugged that in, we brought Jenkins in because there was no CI. The build tool was like a command line app with a server that lived in the office somewhere. So we got rid of that, had Jenkins, started shipping those smaller components on Docker to environments. So there was a test environment which was very brittle. So just having a very clean slate of dev, staging, production, and just actually starting to ship those components to those environments and start testing them out. So that was kind of the journey there. Makes sense.
I had a question in my head and it just flew right out the window. Well, I'm sure it'll come back. Yeah. Anyway, what are some of the things you wished that you had known when you started that, could have helped in that journey?
I was only asked this question the other day, so I've got some ideas fresh in my mind, and I was talking to some of the engineers about it. So we were really early adopters of ECS. So ECS is container orchestration, Amazon's container orchestration framework. So if a container becomes unhealthy, it will bring it back to life. It will manage your green, blue deployments, all of that good stuff. So because we were very early adopters, there was no frameworks, there was no Terraform to integrate with that. So we spent a few weeks and we wrote our own little framework that kind of just proxied Amazon's APIs, written in Python. It's very simple, but looking back, if we had waited 6 months, we could have gotten some really great tools. In fairness, now it hasn't changed in 2 years, and we haven't seen the need to. But for newer stuff, we are using Terraform and the serverless framework and stuff. So it's a little bit inconsistent. A couple of other things. So again, being early adopters of Docker, we decided to host our own Docker registry. And like 3 weeks later, again, Amazon released their registry. So I think that's a big thing, just having to host stuff, try to avoid it at all costs. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's at the last job I had before starting Medit, we were at the very early stages of Docker, and hosting an internal registry at the point when the registry didn't even have authentication. Yeah. So I had to basically write some Lua code, which I didn't even know, with an Nginx fork to be able to connect it to our LDAP system. Yeah. And I was quite proud of it, but it was one of those times where weeks of work went into something that then ended up in the bin.
Exactly. And imagine like that registry going down, or like when you host stuff like that, you don't really take them seriously enough. And imagine then like your containers in production needed to pull an image and it wasn't there or something. So that's nasty. So another one we would have done was when we were breaking apart our monolith, we needed a message broker. And our use case really fitted RabbitMQ. So by doing that, we've been able to break apart the system and build it very much event based. So parts of our system react on events and do something from that, because we've got a lot of the notifications and events and stuff in the system. But hosting that ourselves has been painful. I would really wish I had just paid someone to host our RabbitMQ at the time. But we will look at that and do it very soon because it's taking up too much overhead.
Can you say what the differences between it and something like SQS are that you thought you needed?
Yeah, so like we could very much use SQS for our use cases right now, particularly because we're using Lambda, and SQS and SNS could tie together very nicely. At that time, we weren't, and we have a lot of consumers coming, consuming events from different queues, and it was the right use case at the time. And now we also have JMS stuff going on with ActiveMQ. So there's a lot of different types. There's AMQP, JMS, and SQS and SNS. There's a lot of notifications happening in the system. I think if I had the time, or it could have taken that time at the start, it would have just consolidated all into one.
Yeah, it's always easier to make decisions after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. And when the features are live and working, it's hard to carve out the time, particularly if they're not problematic. If they're just ticking over and they're not causing any stress, with the bigger problems to solve in some cases.
How has React Native worked out for you guys?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. We onboard 200 customers every month. And each of those customers on a certain package, say 150, get an app. And that app is customized for them. And you can imagine teaming and customizing and buying App Store accounts for all those people is time consuming and laborious. And then the other thing is with 5,500 customers, and say 50% of them have the app. So 2,500 have it, iOS and Android. So that's 5,000 binaries you have to manage. And it's 10,000, there's a lot of code base there to manage. So if you could imagine a bug fix, this new payment stuff with Stripe, if something needs to change there, we need to ship a lot of code to actually fix that. And a big thing for us with React Native was, hey, we only need to manage, with this new mechanism, one JavaScript bundle for iOS, one for Android, and Code Deploy will manage all of that for us. So that was huge for us. And we kicked off that really R&D part of that last December, figuring out how those operational efficiencies would really work for us. And the side fact was our Android app was terrible. The customers weren't happy with it. So, we needed to rebuild that from the scratch. So we were thinking, hey, rather than spending a few months building just Android, let's go all in and try and get some really good efficiencies for the business while we're at it. So to answer your question, I've never seen a project go so well. Touch wood. They've literally a really strong senior engineer who joined us, who had a lot of background in iOS development and mobile, and he's just a pro. He came in and picked up the React Native side of things. and he's mentored a graduate who's come up to a really high level to work on that app with him, and they've completed most of it now, and we're ready to start beta testing. So really impressive. I'm really impressed with it. I took a bit of a risk on it, to be honest, but yeah, so far so good.
Nice. I wanted to use it, but we had too much data.
Yeah.
I couldn't justify risking our core product on a technology that we had zero control over, that, Facebook had a bit too much control of.
So for us, the way we saw it was, worst case scenario, we get an Android app out of it at the end of the day. So that's...
Okay. Oops. Searching for an Android on the App Store.
Sorry. On Siri.
Love when that happens.
Searching for Android on the App Store.
Just download a phone. So you wouldn't download a card, would you? the old joke about the RIAA or NPAA. So you didn't have any sort of technology issues with...
Our main challenge would have been the calendar view. So we display a bunch of availability. We're pulling down, we're hitting a rules engine to display availability for their salons, and it's heavy on performance to pull that down and scroll through a really nice calendar. But Nicola has done an amazing job he actually forked one of the React Native calendars, and he's built an awesome solution there. So that would be our main challenge, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's always nice when it does work.
Yeah.
I've known some other people who've had issues. Yeah. I think they were able to carry on, but our massive amount of data would have just wrecked, something like, I've lost it, Redux or one of those data helper.
So we looked at even another challenge for some apps might be they need native capabilities, and 99% of our use cases are covered. So we're cool on that, because essentially it's a booking flow with personalized, login, loyalty points, that side of things, and then push notifications and stuff like that, which are all handled.
Yeah, that's it was the right move for us not using it, but also our iOS app has been out for a year, and our Android app is coming out this week or something soon, very, very soon. It's either this week or next week, depending on.
We always have this challenge where we build on iOS and then we say, okay, let's check the product data, check the usage. Let's give it a bit of time and see how it works, but we never come back to it. We have another app, our staff member app, which is for Salon staff members, and there's a couple of features that is just lagging behind. So if the branded app goes well, we'll probably look at rebuilding our staff app in React Native as well. One thing not to do is mix React Native and native. I've heard it'll bring you hell.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
It's when I first looked at React, which was now is 2.5 years ago. So the state of it now is nothing like what the state of it was 2.5 years
totally.
ago.
And it's that famous article from Airbnb and why they walked away from React Native. One of their main things was they built a Frankenstein app where it was both, and every time a new developer went to build a screen, it would be, should this be native or React Native, and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, I could have imagined us being in exactly that type of situation. So, did I see that you're using Code Push?
Yeah, Code Push is our solution for essentially distributing bug fixes and updates to those apps. Microsoft's Code Push, and really, really impressive, free as well.
So that you don't have to typically update the entire mobile application. Through the iOS App Store, the Google Play Store, whatever, but you would push the code that the application on the user's device would then download the newest payload of content.
Well, so what's really powerful there for us as a business is rather than, a bug for 5,000 apps having to run CI jobs to build all of those IPAs and APKs, you literally just update your bundle of JavaScript and every user gets it. So no, you don't even need to go through the App Store and wait. And then the other thing is actually a lot of customers rebrand or get sold or rename or whatever. So that's just really easy for us to change that stuff. it's a quite big questionable how, you could literally you could ship new features. You could like change your whole flow of your app. So you're kind of breaking the review guidelines, but it's a gray area.
Yeah, that was my next question was, have you had any issues with Apple or?
We've had lots of issues with Apple. So, our apps were all on one developer account for a long time. So we've got about 1,500 apps under Phorest. And when they started cracking down on the branded templating app guidelines, essentially they wanted to clean up the store and they wanted to prevent people from having copy apps. So for us, that meant every salon who had an app needed to have their own app store account. So it was a big change for us as a business and operationally to actually do that. But we've embraced it and we're moving forward with it.
Yeah, it's kind of a pain that they forced that, but
yeah. It's put up some businesses like completely out of pocket. Like if you can imagine, there's a lot of companies out there who do that. Yeah. So the solution is that your customer buys an app store account and you do that. So for us, that meant having really good automation around we use Fastlane for all of those builds right now. You need to have really good automation there to be able to switch code sign and all that stuff.
Yeah. And have you had major issues since the Phorest to the two-factor authentication?
Yeah. So if you can imagine, we're getting salon owners to sign up for accounts, and we need them to. You can only do three. You can only authenticate 3 accounts on your phone before it stops. Yeah. So it's fun. Our automation is pretty good. We have actually a team in the Philippines who manage a lot of this stuff. So there's actually a Slack channel that when an SMS comes in, the verification code goes into the Slack channel and they can use it, and lots of fun stuff there. We had to get creative.
Okay. How do you do road mapping?
Oh, good question. That's a big question.
Because that's a major challenge that we have.
Yeah. So
I have.
Yeah. So from a product point of view, we don't try not to look at what's coming in 9 months' time or in specific quarters. We look at like, what are the problems we're trying to solve now? What are coming up next? And what are we going to look at in the future? So we look at it in those 3 ways. And when we're working on stuff now, obviously we're very clear on how we're going to solve the problem. And that obviously comes from a feed of what's up next. And when we're looking at what's coming up next, we talk to our customers a lot. We go and work in the salons. We use prototyping. We use our user voice community in product surveys to really drill down on what they need. And we flesh that out and essentially, involve a lot of the team and the rest of the company in those decisions as well. Strategically, like we set out goals for over the next 3 years, and everything we work on should feed into those things. So for us, it's getting to 12,000 salons. It's increasing the average bill of the end user of the salons, and it's also to increase the revenue of the salons by 10%. So we focus a lot of our decision making on them and back to what the company set out to do, which is really to help small SMBs to run and grow their business. So our decision making is all based on that, and our roadmap is always now, next, and future.
Okay. How do you typically actually work? Is it like in sprints or Kanban? Or
sprints typically, yeah. So I mentioned we've got 5 teams, but 4 of them are product development. So 2-week sprints. Some of them do 1 week. Some one of them have been experimenting with the Basecamp 6-week cycle model. That's very effective when you've got small bursts of work, but not very effective when you've got huge pieces of work. So we've got. What works for us really well is typically 2-week sprints, keep it in Jira. We've got product owners for each team, designers, and it works quite fluidly. I'm not planning on changing anytime soon.
Good. Yeah, that's we haven't hit the right mix of the right thing yet. I mean, we go through really productive phases where we can focus on something and deliver, but having a very busy product owner. It's tough.
It takes discipline. Like it really takes discipline to say no to people and to prioritize properly. Because what we've made a mistake before is just I call them spinning plates, just too many things going at the same time. And you just make yourself less effective at the end of the day.
100%. If you're looking at Jira and thinking, I wonder what I should be working on. You're definitely not
Yeah.
using the tool or the techniques the
We
way
just-
that you should.
We try to, like, each team I mentioned has a specific vertical on the roadmap, and they're very much aligned to the problems that roadmap and that vertical slice of the roadmap is trying to solve. So each sprint should have a very clear goal. What are we trying to achieve by the end of it? What is our product usage going to be when this feature is delivered? What revenues is it going to make? How's that going to affect the bottom line? So we try to be data driven around that. The other thing I was going to mention about like finding it hard to get the right mix is like we've got like 50% of our team is distributed. So some people, they maybe have to drop their kids to school really early in the morning, and stand up maybe doesn't suit sometimes. So you have to be flexible. Like some do it at 11, some at 10. Some do use actually automated status updates. You kind of have to pick what's right for the mix of people.
Where are your remote people located?
Everywhere. So we've got a guy in Cork. We've got 4 people in Poland, a person in Hong Kong, one person in Italy, another in France, and soon to be Argentina as well. So yeah, our main kind of rule is if you're going to be working remotely for us, you need to stick to our time zone, and that works pretty well. We try to get folks over twice a year for like offsites, company gatherings, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we do the same. We have some guys over in India.
Yeah.
And
you have to kind of
bring them over. Yeah. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think like read so much about this, and there's a big distinction between like distributed teams and remote workers. So the word distributed, I try to make sure I use that all the time, because very much it's not about Phorest and Dublin being the HQ and these people being like feeding into us. It's we're a team, and we're very much distributed around the world, and I think it's an important kind of distinction.
I like that. Yeah. That's definitely we already embrace that philosophy, but I hadn't heard of the language.
Yeah.
And that's good language.
Yeah. Cheers.
Words do matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Especially when they're written and people can't see you face to face.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you're hiring. What types of roles are you looking for?
Yeah. So I mentioned a big rebuild of our product, and that's a lot of front end work. So we're always looking for good front end engineers. Particularly, we're bought into Ember on that side of things, and then back end. A lot of our back end components are Java. Kind of, there's a lot of big data problems there and challenges to solve. So anyone who's interested in that kind of stuff is very much like to talk to them.
If you are considering moving over to React Native, will the Ember change to React possibly?
No, I don't think so. And there's lots of arguments there to talk about reuse and stuff, but our online bookings platform was built a long time ago in Ember. We've built a lot of really good foundations. Ember is, for me, built and designed and pushed by the community for big, ambitious projects, and gives you a lot of the things you need to do that. So it's very much the right fit for the amount of work we need to do with it, and the people as well we have are very skilled in it. So yeah, it's all JavaScript at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I'm pissing people off by saying that.
With the ShipItCon, is there anything you're looking for from people? Do you need volunteers or?
Absolutely. So we need obviously people to come would be a good start. Yeah. We really could do with some volunteers to help us out on the day with attendees, logistics, that kind of stuff. We've got 4 people on the team now who are doing great stuff, but particularly on the day it'd be great. And if you think your company could do with pushing your employer brand a little bit, a sponsorship isn't hugely expensive, and we've got lots of great people attending, so that could be really good for you. So yeah.
And so I'm sure some people are thinking that I'd like to help, but I've never done anything like that. That's not a barrier?
No, you literally come. We'll put a T-shirt on you and we'll give you a role. It doesn't even matter if you're not technical. And as well, if you're thinking about maybe pushing yourself to do your first talk. I would encourage people to just submit a talk if there's something you're interested in. We've got people who would coach you on public speaking and help you with the nerves, but it might be really good for you to push yourself out of your comfort zone and go for it.
Nice. How did you get into speaking at meetups and conferences?
That's a good question. I don't like it. Like I get very nervous, like, but I just do it. And
you do very well every time I've seen you.
It's really about like I like to challenge myself in different ways, and technically I could always write code and plumb things together, but just around meeting people and meeting really interesting people like yourself, and I really enjoy it. I get a kick out of it, although it's scary. Yeah,
I'm sure it is. Yeah. I've been delaying outlining my first talk for a little while.
The best way to do is commit yourself to it without even having really properly prepared, and then you have to do it.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything we haven't touched on?
No, it's been great. Lots of great topics covered. And interesting way to start the day, I'd say.
All right. Well,
thanks very much.
Thanks very much for joining us. And so, call to action. Get your ShipItCon ticket. Come volunteer. Submit your talk. Anything else?
Absolutely. Check out our careers page, Phorest.com.
All right. And how can people reach you?
At John Whale Doran, 1L, Twitter, the best shout.
Okay.
Pretty active there. So
great.
Yeah.
I'll stick a link to that and a link to ShipItCon in the show notes.
Yeah, awesome. We also have an internal blog, which is not so much focused on the end users of Phorest, but more so how we operate as a business and some of our philosophies around hiring, building product, marketing, lots of different areas. So it's called nothingventured.rocks. If you want to check that out as well, it's good. Lots of good posts there.
I'll throw that link in there too.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thank you all for listening. Until next time, remember, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.